Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I are joined by our friend Bev Cotton, Director of Learning Supports with Northern Gateway Public Schools. Bev has been instrumental in guiding inclusive education facilitators across her division, helping them understand and implement collaborative response in their schools. We can't wait to dive into her journey and the incredible work she's doing to build capacity for inclusive education. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
Welcome to another episode of Leading Collaborative Response. As always, I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson.
Today, we're thrilled to have Bev Cotton with us. Bev has spent her career in rural school divisions, teaching in special education and junior, senior high social studies. Over the past 11 years, she has served as a learning services coordinator for inclusive education and now as director of learning supports. In this episode, we'll focus on how Bev has championed collaborative response by supporting inclusive education facilitators in every school. We'll hear her insights, successes, and advice for creating a strong foundation for inclusive education through collaborative response. Let's jump in and learn more from Bev. Hi, Bev.
Hi, Lorna and Kurtis. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, great to have you here. And I think I've probably heard the IEF acronym said out by its full name 3 times in my lifetime in Northern Gateway. So to hear it twice in one introduction is kind of unique.
It's funny, we use so many acronyms in education that, we get used to just talking that way and other people will look at you like, what are you saying? You're speaking a different language.
Different language, different vocabulary, and often you have to go back and say, oh, I meant this.
Wait a minute. Yeah,
so,
that's exactly.
Bev, we started off with the more formal bio, but why don't you give us just a little bit of your background and really what led you to the point that you're at now of being passionate around ensuring inclusive learning environments?
Wow. That's actually a big question.
Yes, it is.
I think the passion really just comes from it's the way I was mentored. It is what we do. It is what it is. And I never saw it as something different or something unique. I actually started my career out in social work, and I worked for 2 years for the Alberta government and working with special needs kids. So most of those were your behavior students, the ones that had been removed from the home. And my job was to take them different places around Grand Prairie and to just be with them. And it was always, they're just like anybody else. Like, let's just support them, give them the skills that they need, and let's just keep going. And then I switched out and went into teaching. And in my first teaching job up in Grand Cache, I had a wonderful mentor, and that's what I got. This is just the way it is. We don't look at anybody with a label. We don't look at anybody different. And I think that's where my passion has come from.
Oh, that's outstanding. And obviously you're preaching to the converted here. We believe that to our core as well.
Yeah.
And really has impacted and formulated your belief system around how we support students, regardless of their needs.
Mm-hmm. And like you always say, we don't tier or level the students, we level the supports.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, Bev, can you just give us a little bit of background around your time in Northern Gateway and where Northern Gateway is situated and what your position in that district is?
Yeah, and a little bit more about the schools that you serve as well.
Okay, so I do classify us as a rural school division.
Mhm.
We stretch along the corridor of Highway 43. So we have 16 schools. I'd have to say we have 5 main communities in that we have Valley View, Fox Creek, Whitecourt, Marythorpe, and Onaway.
Okay.
And so we have 16 schools. We have 5 that would be a junior, senior high setting. One kind of is a middle school at 6 to 8, but it's still in that junior, senior high. And then we have 5 that are kind of the high school. Either they're a 7 through 12 or 9 through 12 or an 8 through 12, but basically it's a junior, senior high. We also have 4 colonies. We have 3 that are around Valley View, so up more northwest towards Grand Prairie. And we have 1 that's in Rochford Bridge. So that's between Marythorpe and a community called Sangudo, where we have a K-9 school. So the one thing is that was part of the learning of all of this is each one of our communities and each one of our schools is so radically different in terms of their composition.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's a great picture for our listeners, and to understand that this is even more geographically for those that are not from an Alberta context, out north, it would be northwest of Edmonton, correct?
We're northwest of Edmonton, yeah.
Yeah.
So for a lot of our service providers, they're always coming out of either Edmonton, St. Albert area or Grand Prairie.
Right.
So we, what we're not able to do ourselves, we're always looking at how can we bring those supports in. And that's one challenge that we're always overcoming is that geographical barrier. Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'm more of a drive girl.
Yeah.
So I have done this more than once. It's not my favorite, but if I have to drive from Valley View to Onaway nonstop, it takes me about 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
quite a distance.
Yeah, and that's a great way to kind of show the geographic landscape from one end of the division to the other.
Yeah.
So, Bev, Northern Gateway's engaged in collaborative response work now for over a decade. It's been a long time in different variations and different forms, but I'd love for you to share out with our audience what have been some of the personal ahas that you've made in relation to collaborative response and your role supporting and leading learning supports.
Now, just before you jump into that, Bev, I just want to I want to remind you of a time about 4 years ago. I know I can't remember exactly where I was, but I had the phone call from you and I said, okay, I'm on the road, but I'll pull over and we can chat. And so I remember talking to you from my car and you were so excited about some revelations through this work that has been happening in Northern Gateway, but in particular in relation to inclusive education and with your Inclusive Education Facilitators. So talk a little bit about how that came about and why you were so excited at that time.
Lorna, let me know
making that phone call.
Yeah. I had the communication after with her with, you should have heard her. She was buzzing.
Okay. Yeah. That's the thing I need to work on still is sometimes I get an idea and I get a little enthusiastic.
Great.
So to be honest, and I remember saying this to you, and I've showed you my book afterwards. I had sat down and I had read your new collaborative response. And that book there spoke more to me this time, maybe because I was older, maybe I had more experience in my role than the first book did. Yeah, to be totally honest. And
we have to admit, and I'll interject that we get nervous now when we see someone pull out the old book because it captured thinking at a point in time, but the work has evolved so much since that point, and I'm really glad you recognize that.
And the connectedness of all
that's where it was. So we read that book, and Kurtis, I know you remember that we had a small book study here with just principles, but we only did one small section where I sat down, read the whole thing tip to toe, read many parts of it over and over again. And what kept coming to me was, this has inclusive education facilitators. So some divisions would call them a learning support teacher, but it had that person weaved each and every place. There was no place throughout the whole process of collaborative response that didn't have the IEF there.
Yeah.
And so that was my excitement. But it was also my challenge, which is why I reached out to Lorna, because everything that was built, all the work that we were doing, in addition to our quality learning environment, or QLE, that we have in our division, in order to make all of that work, someplace there was an IEF that had a land, that had a hand, that had a lens that needed to be a part of that. And so it was, we need to align this. And even still now with the AHAs, it's the power, and I actually wrote that down last night. I need to tell them, it's the power and the information that comes from having that system in place that makes this so strong. And that's my AHA.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, because we have the IEFs in there. We have a collaborative response that's in each and every one of our schools. They go through the collaborative response. Often we just hear the CTM, and we're working hard at, no, they're two different things. The CTM is just one part of that collaborative response. And that's the power. That's my aha, is that we need to look at the whole process and not just the CTM. But don't get me wrong, that CTM is wonderful in terms of data and information and support that we can give the students and the staff and people working, the parents even. That's where it comes from.
Excited to hear that. And we're going to come back to the CTM, or the collaborative team meeting, because we want to dissect some of your work around that. But man, that aha of, no, this person doesn't become involved just when it's a highest need student, or when we're ready to reach out for a referral or something like that. These roles are involved in every layer of team that is happening, which is so critically important. And it's how you build not just the capacity of that person or the person in that role, but their involvement in each of the teams to build everybody else's capacity.
Well, and which includes the but it includes that learning component, that planning component, because right now you have the teachers that are doing that, but sometimes it's just reaching out there and saying, hey, do you have an idea universal that we can use here? And then that's going to make the next one at the CTM, and then the student support meeting, and then case consult even stronger.
Yeah.
And so that was the one. Yeah.
Historically, and Bev, you've lived this, I've lived this in my roles in school divisions as well, but historically, really thinking about how we support students with more intensive needs as a separate and apart piece.
Yeah.
And when we started to, across Alberta, when we started to talk about inclusion, what does that actually mean? It's become really apparent that through collaborative response and understanding how all of the pieces connect with each other, that it's not separate and apart, that everything that we're deciding for students have multiple layers involved, and that, our inclusive education facilitators or our learning support teachers
or special ed personnel, depending on where you're located,
they all become integral in the learning piece, as well as the supporting through, perhaps external providers.
And I think that's where my other two ahas came. So the one aha is, when the schools build the tiers, we don't always do it from an inclusive education facilitator lens. We do it from inclusive education within each individual site. So what really needed to happen is, with the IEF, so they felt a part of it, is we've been building or trying to build that lens now with the IEFs. So
Yeah.
they themselves have a tier that they're looking at. Of this is what I can do at each level. So I think that was the kind of aha for me. And that was the work that we started on. And then the other part is, and it goes back, Kurtis, to something that you shared quite a while ago, is it has to be iterative.
Mm-hmm.
So often when we start with new programs or we hear a new idea and we think, yeah, we're going to go do this, it can never be a one and done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if
and it's
there's
never a
something,
straight path.
no, and if there's something I've really learned on this work that we've done is it has to have those loops, and those loops have to have little layers. And sometimes you do need to go off that path a bit, but it's going to make the layer stronger when you bring that part back in.
Yeah.
So those little divots, those little, road trips through the the creek bed help, and then you get back onto the lane that you need to be on. But yeah, it has to be iterative, and you have to have everybody knowing that going in.
Yeah.
This isn't a one done. This is always, as we learn, as we come stronger, as our staff develops this, then we give them something else. So you're always going back, universal building up, universal building up.
The interesting thing with that is Adam Grant talks about it may feel like you're going in circles, but you're not. When you're looping, every loop you're going deeper. And the idea is
spiral.
As you come back into the next looping, you are not the same person, or you're not in the same place as an organization that you were the first time. So now you're going to loop back around, but be at a different place to engage, interact, or to understand deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is. You become stronger as an educational person. That's what I would say. You become the leader and the learner at the same time.
Yeah. And that's a great place, Bev, to be able to take that next step in thinking about and sharing with our audience about what are the explicit things that you have done. We've talked a little bit about working with the IEFs, but can you share some examples of what are some of the things that you've actually worked through with your IEFs to really create that connectedness within collaborative response?
We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you looking to maximize the collaborative capacity of your school or district? Are you wanting to take your professional learning communities or response to intervention work to the next level? Have you started the work in collaborative response but are looking to reignite or deepen your plans? We would love to have you join us at the 2025 Collaborative Response Retreat happening May 2nd and 3rd in beautiful Lacombe, Alberta.
Over the 2 days, we have an intentionally designed program of breakout sessions and sharing, along with supported team planning time to ensure that you walk away with a plan for introducing or strengthening collaborative response in your organization for the upcoming year. With a concentrated focus on team planning, networking, and individualized support for your school, the Collaborative Response Retreat is an outstanding opportunity to grow your team's understanding and implementation of this powerful support framework. We are also planning some fun time so you can relax and enjoy activities as a team in our historic community of Lacombe in central Alberta.
In addition, participants will gain access to an extensive repository of online resources to deepen their understanding and support ongoing implementation. Plan to join a growing network of educators dedicated to responding to the diverse needs of their learners. We've capped our attendance at 140 participants, so make sure to register early to secure your team spot. We're looking forward to seeing you in Lacombe in May. And now back to our conversation.
I think the biggest part was bringing in a process, a foundation, and a stronger understanding of what each part means. Mm-hmm. What happened, and even when I was in the role as an inclusive education facilitator, and I still am.
Yeah.
Not very good at it some days, but I still am, because I do help out at the colonies. For the 3 colonies, we have 2 that I kind of oversee and help out when needed, right? So I still keep that. That's very important to me, of still being an inclusive education facilitator. But what started to happen is everybody took that role, everybody took that person, and it became a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and who knew where we were going. And
So
so it really was,
sorry, Bev, just to expand on that. So the intention was every school has an education facilitator, and we could, depending on what district or organization, we could supplant learning support teacher or
yes, yeah,
special education coordinator.
yeah,
Like we're talking about that person,
yeah.
but that in every school, soup to nuts on what that person was potentially doing.
Soup to nuts on what they're doing, soup to nuts on what experience they may have, soup to nuts in terms of the time allocated to that
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wide variance, right?
Right? A very wide variance. So that was part of my, I've got an idea. Are you with me on the journey? Uh, let's bring in something that's more solidified. Let's define what this means for Northern Gateway Public Schools, keeping in mind that at the same time we have that quality learning environment. And to keep everything together as one, they are merged. They're not two separate things that we're working on. I shouldn't be talking with my hands.
Oh, it's great.
Good. Yeah. So Bev, then, talk about that work that we've done. Of course, because we had that soup to nuts, then we had a chance to be able to really think about what is the role of the
Clearly defining
inclusive
and
education
articulating it.
facilitator. Yeah.
Yeah.
And really thinking about the role in terms of the QLE, the quality learning environment, and collaborative response. And how do we create that consistency?
So that kind of what was our starting point. Like, what is the process and what are the procedures that we need to have in place and what does it look like? I needed everybody to feel this is who they are and this is what it means to have this position.
Yeah.
And where it's evolved to is this year we had quite a change in terms of inclusive education facilitators. So now when you talk that iterative process, as we have a new person in and they're asking questions, oh, okay, that makes this, and this is how we can work this, or makes the mentoring of it a little bit easier because they can understand where it is. But it really started out with me having a very transparent conversation with the IEF saying, this is my vision. My vision is not for you to be managerial. My vision for you is to be an instructional leader, side by side, elbow to elbow, in the classroom to support these children that might have an identified need or may not have an identified need or disability. But how can we layer the supports in that classroom through the lens of an IEF?
Yeah.
And so that was the start. And so the very beginning is very messy. And that was my other, it wasn't an aha. I knew going in, this is going to get messy. It's going to look ugly. We're going to feel like tearing our hair out, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. And it was just doing that. The biggest thing was having them write down on a sticky all the jobs that they did. And we covered our boardroom.
We had
all
so
the
many
way
piles
around
of sticky notes everywhere.
trying to figure out, okay, we'd come up with a theme and the stickies would go up there, and then we'd come up with another theme and there were still stickies left. Okay, we need more. And so that's where that start came from.
Yeah.
And that's where we looked, and we always went back. We started this journey not only with my vision and finding out what everybody's doing to bring in the consistency, but we use the book as our guide. So where does this fit under collaborative response planning? Where does this fit under collaborative response CTM? Where does this fit here? And where does this fit here? And then the other one was, that's not the role of an inclusive education. That's the role of a teacher. That's part of being the culture of a teacher. Like running a snack shop, for example, that's not you. You don't do that role because you're an inclusive education facilitator. That's the role that you're doing as contributing to the culture of a school. So it was those conversations and getting everybody's view of where does this fit? And then from there, we started our process of, okay, how do we bring this down so that we now have a document that shows the roles and responsibilities, and we've layered it out. This can be done by an admin assistant. This can be done, or secretary. This can be done and should be done by the teachers. This should be done by the inclusive education facilitators. Then there's actually a category where it's inclusive education facilitator, but we have the qualifier support to the principal, because we know it's actually the principal's role to do that. But they are going to rely on the inclusive education facilitator for their point of view.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. So we had that document. So we were able to create that. We were able to create a stronger understanding of what a CTM is, and how we came about it that way was actually kind of different. I got to say, this was really exciting, and it's still really exciting to me. Our IEFs do CTMs, Kurtis.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating because we've seen now so many applications of the process happening now around. Yeah, we can use it to talk about students, but we can also use the process to talk about other key issues.
So to me, that was the big thing, because we had our 4 positions. We usually have, we have our facilitator, we have our recorder, we have our timekeeper, we have our interrupter. We still, just like at any CTM in a school, we make sure everybody has a clear understanding of the roles. We usually do the review of what our norms are, our expectations at the beginning of the day. So that's the one part I don't repeat.
So
we do our celebrations.
You're bringing your IEFs from each school, so around 16-ish people, and they're coming together on a different points during the year to collaborate,
have a collaborative team meeting.
And you're engaging that process right in that day with them.
Yes. So we have 3 division days. We do it for an hour on each of our 3 division days, where I have all the inclusive education facilitators here at division office. And then I have also done them on our 2 virtual meetings. And sometimes I do one on I call it my coffee chat with Cotton. So I try and have one, just at a different time, just if there's something building. Okay, what can we do? This is a concern. Let's bring a CTM together and see what we can do. Those ones aren't as successful, so I haven't done them as much this year as in the past, because it's difficult to get all 16 at the end of the day to come in. So that's why it works a lot better on my virtual meetings or in person, but I hold them both ways.
But my understanding too, from speaking with Lorna, is you have 2 different collaborative team meetings, but each one has a slightly different purpose, even though you're using the similar structure. Can you describe that?
It's the same structure. So first we do our celebrations, and then we look at our key issues. Now, we started off small, and we looked at what are some roles that you as an IEF do that you sometimes struggle with, especially if you're new, or you're in a school and maybe the parent support isn't as strong as it could be. So one question that we did, for example, was, how do you engage parents in authentically collaborating to and signing ISPs? Because we do have that, in total honesty, a concern sometimes is getting parents to sign an ISP, or even contributing to it. They would prefer you just give them a signed document and they do it. So we held that as a CTM.
So that the key issues from that are actually key issues I'm experiencing in my role.
In their role.
As an IEF. Right. As an IEF in that role, not as a classroom teacher, as an IEF. So it could be signing of ISPs. It could be working with service providers, right? Anything that I do within my role. How do I do a social emotional support plan? Could be a variety of things. Then we got them used to doing it that way first.
Now, Bev, before you jump into the next one, I just want to take a moment to say that this becomes it uses the same process. So we're
Yep.
doing multiple things by setting this up with the IEFs. And that is that, first of all, we're modeling that process so that they can
Following the
take
process,
that back to their school and understand how that process within the collaborative team meeting works. But the beautiful part of being able to focus on their role is that there are IEFs who have lots of experience, some that are just brand new. And this really allows us to gather all of the ideas or potential ideas, and they're sharing on current issues that they're facing in their role, which is really powerful.
And I'm going to make a prediction here and tell me if I'm right or wrong. I would imagine that doing that formalized, and you're not doing it a large number of times during the year. It's a
Nope.
few times, but I'm assuming it's also building up the connections between them so that I don't have to wait 2 months for our next IEF day. I'm going to reach
Yeah.
out on a call
Yeah.
because I know this person has some experience in this area.
And actually, that's done right in the meetings now.
Yeah.
So when somebody gives an idea and they really like it, we make that connection right then and there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's what I meant by we're leaders and we're learners. So this gives them the opportunity, not with, the whole staff around them and all the eyes of here's a concern of what can you do. This gives them the comfortability of this is what I can do, or I can go out and I can ask somebody else, what have you done in this case? Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And now we've taken it where we still have a question that's sort of like that. What's a burning issue that you have in your school that we need to work at that way? But the second one is more of when you look at students' needs. So for example, working on an AAC device. And how do we make sure that an AAC device is used in a school by all the staff or core boards or anything like that? How can we build that up? How do we support the students that have an AAC device? And so that becomes our second question. So we always have two questions. One is more role focused,
Yeah.
and one is more still student focused.
So
And
for instance, if I'm an IEF in Sangudo Community School, I could bring I have a student with this concern,
Mhm.
and now we can leverage the group to
Yep.
focus in on what could we do.
So one of the key issues that came forward when we were focusing on students was, I have a runner. What do I do?
Yeah, I have a safety issue. I have an escape artist. This person is constantly
Yeah.
running. What do I do? So they said, okay, here's the issue. Here's our concern. Okay, what other schools have this? And so again, it becomes the schools. It doesn't become me as the IEF. It becomes the
No.
schools. Well, very quickly, we have a lot of schools that say, oh, I have a person that fits this criteria. Okay, now we've got that down. This is the why. Then we have one, two, sometimes more. Sometimes we don't have anybody. And it's like, okay, what can we learn from them, or what do we need to research among us so that we have the support that's needed?
Yeah, and the beautiful part about that, the focus on student, is that, first of all, because we're across schools, we don't bring up student names. It's just focusing in on that issue. But now, whether a school has that immediate concern in the moment, or whether they've experienced it in the past, then all of those ideas come forward so that the person who's brought forward that issue has just tons of ideas to be able to relate
I
to.
can also imagine a situation where I don't have a runner now, but next fall, guess who showed up at my door?
Yeah. And so that's what we've created there. Yeah.
Wow. And I imagine that has really brought cohesion and coherence to the IEFs of feeling supported in their role. And because there's only one in each building, I could assume that it could sometimes feel isolating in that role without some of these collaborative structures.
And it's been wonderful with some of the new ones that have joined us because we can give them back. Oh, these are the ones we've looked at. Here are our key factors or challenges that we looked at. And look at, here are some strategies and the schools identified. And if you're
Yeah.
not too sure, reach out to me and I'll help you make that connection.
I could also imagine a scenario, though, too, within that, where if we bring up a student and a key issue concern, and there's not a whole lot, our toolboxes are not that deep, that points to you from a leadership perspective of, okay, we need some PD.
And that goes back to what I said with the collaborative response. The CTM does give me a lot of data, and it does give me a lot of information to move on.
Yeah.
And so that's what the CTM through the IEF helps me as a division leader to move forward on. Yeah.
So Bev, you have talked with me before about, what your meetings would have been like a number of years ago, let's say 6 years ago, compared to what they are now is very different. And I'd love for you to talk about that, but I also would like to recognize that you have done a lot of really intentional work on building relationships with your team as well. And so love for you to share a little bit about that too.
We'll be right back to continue this episode. Have you ever walked out of a meeting and felt that nothing was accomplished? Have you ever sat during a team meeting creating your grocery list for the end of the day? Have you ever felt like the staff of the hit TV show The Office when Michael calls everyone to the conference room? Our most valuable resource is time. When you are tasked with leading any type of a meeting, your first question should be, how do I use this time effectively for myself and for my team? This requires planning. No longer can we call over the PA, everyone meet in the staff room, we have some things to discuss. Instead, we need to invest some time in planning the meeting agenda and how we engage with our team to produce the results we are hoping to achieve. Access the free guide, 5 planning considerations to transform your team meetings, and you'll receive valuable tips to ensure your team meeting time is effective, productive, and engaging. Go to bit.ly/5planningteams. That's number 5 planning teams, all one word. Access the guide, and never again will you hear this meeting could have just been an email. And now back to our conversation.
But those relationships with the team also become the modeling that I need them to have in their school, right?
Absolutely.
So it's always that full circle. But I've always said I could never do this journey. I could never have had the idea without the support, not only from the deputy superintendent and the superintendent within our division, but also the other way. If I didn't have or feel comfortable that the inclusive education facilitators would join me on this path, nothing ever would have happened. It wouldn't have moved forward, but the timing was right. When I first came on, it just seemed our inclusive education facilitator meetings were just straight sit and get
information.
Right. I remember once somebody just saying, well, it's in the boats. And I'm thinking, I have a boat? Like, I'm in Alberta. I swear I'm in Alberta. We're a landlocked province. Where's my boat? But what they were talking about was the behavior observation, right?
Yeah.
Boat's book. And I'm going, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it was a lot of sit and get. And when you walked away, it was like you had all more of these jobs. And it's like, where do I start? I always feel like I'm drowning. Yeah. And I continued that for a while. And then what I did one day is I just blew it up over the summer and I said, this isn't what I want. So then I went to a couple of years where the morning was kind of the sit and get. This is stuff I need you to know. And then the afternoon, I purposely had some sort of professional learning. So whether I had a psychologist come in or a speech language pathologist, or we did work on something that we were trying to build, I had an afternoon that was always that. Then with a collaborative response, that was the aha. That's what I mean by the aha, is here was some stuff that's managerial. It's like a staff meeting. You can send that out through an email. You don't need to have a meeting of everybody together to do that.
Yeah.
And with your division, a meeting like that is not only costly for time, but travel.
Well, it's travel.
Lunches.
Yeah. It's windshield time. It's travel. They're out of the schools. And some of these students, they really depend. That's their relationship. That's their check-in person. Like, oh no, if this person's gone, I'm not going to do well. Yeah, you're still going to do well. We've got other people built up, right? But so that's when it was like, no, this isn't working. So let's rechange everything. And that was part of my excitement of reaching out to Lorna. So that's kind of full circle of how it came about. And now anything managerial, it goes out through an email. It goes out through, I have created a Inclusive Education Facilitator guide. It goes out in that guide, and I just explain more of what that goes. We have weekly memos that are sent out. So the little tidbits in there, it goes there. And then, email still work, and so does the phone. So I just pick up the phone and I still talk to people. I haven't got there yet, but what I'm trying to do is to become involved in a PLC, like that professional learning. So that first part with a couple of inclusive education facilitators so that we can then model that learning and extend it further. But I'm not as far along on that journey as I'd like to be. That's my next. I need to really get in there and get that going so that it becomes stronger when you have that PLC, and then you have your CTM, and then you have your student supports and your case consults.
Awesome.
So Bev, when we think about all of this very intentional work that you've been doing with the IEFs, over the last couple of years, how has that impacted, or how do you think it has impacted the collaborative structures and the culture of collaboration in your schools?
Back at the schools. Yeah.
Big time. Yeah, I think it has. I think I remember, I think it was last year, Lorna, when we had one of them and we were going through again, these are what the parts mean. And then we did a CTM, and the IEF said to me, you mean I'm not supposed to walk away with absolutely everything to do?
Yeah.
And we said, no, you're not. You mean I don't need to do this? No, you don't.
There's more intensive layers where, yes, you
Yeah.
are going to walk away with
Yeah.
action, but
Yeah.
not that collaborative team meeting.
Yeah. And so now it's jokingly, when it seems like on that last one with WeCollab, until everything was set up on the program, all the emails came to me. I jokingly said to them all, I said, hey, I thought I wasn't supposed to walk away with everything. But it is good. I think that's what it is because there is more collaboration, and they realize that they can do that. Plus, we've built over the last year. So this is real new. We just rolled it out in October of how do we take the information that an IEF is learning about a student at a CTM and realize, okay, this now it's too much airtime at a CTM. This isn't the right venue. How do we move it from a CTM to that student support level? Right? That student support meeting, because even in a small school, even if we just have a principal and IEF, we have to have those meetings.
Yeah.
So how do we move it from there to having that team, however big or small it is? And so we've actually created a referral form, and we call it moving up the continuum, because that's kind of where we are. So it's that type of work that keeps all of this going.
Awesome. Well, I think you might be repeating yourself potentially, but we always like asking anyone who comes on to finish this statement for us. As a result of collaborative response, we have seen. How would you finish that from your leadership perspective, Bev?
We have seen it grow our division and bring our division closer together. We have seen the power of it in that we now do it with our administrators. We have CTM conversations now from the principal lens, because we've seen that it can work as in the schools, and we have seen that it can work in the IEF world. And I think as a division, we are also looking at, okay, let's look at the schools. Let's go through this from a CTM of who needs more support, or are we at a case consult? We just have to change the terminology a bit, but the foundation and that process is the same.
Yeah. Well, and I love that too, of once we get the process in place, that's really the critical part.
Yeah. Well, and really clearly understanding those layers that exist all the way through in successfully supporting a student, regardless of their need. Yeah. So
And
Bev,
just like the IEFs, the principals now have different people that they can reach out to too, right? Like it's growing that part. I think it's making it stronger, and it works so nicely with our quality learning environment.
Mhm.
yeah, beautifully so.
Well, boy, we could take another 5 hours
Yeah.
on this podcast, Bev, if you had time, because the work around quality learning environments and
There's so
yeah,
much.
it's all layered.
Oh dear. Well, Bev, we've talked a little bit about where you came from and how, the work that you've done in Northern Gateway over the years. But just, I'm going to share a question with you. And it might make you think a little bit, but here we go. If you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give to your past self in relation to collaborative response?
Started earlier.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I would have. I truly believe that that's the way it goes. It's what gels or brings everything together. And
Mhm.
I wish when we first started this back in 10 years ago, which is right when I was moving away from an IEF into this role, I would have stuck with it and been able to fine tune that a bit more and kept the IEFs as a part of that journey right then and there versus, but at the same time, that's part of the growth in the iterative
Yeah,
process, right? Like
it
that's
is.
it
that's where
is.
we got the second book, and that's where we got different ways of making that substantial shift and of looking at the different things. And it's learning from that maybe the timing is right now. So I guess I would be telling myself, going back 6 years, that was the right decision.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hopefully that continues.
Well, outstanding, Bev. And we of course are going to include your email address in the show notes if people have questions and want to be able to reach out. And of course, we have you as part of our retreat
So
in
Yes.
excited.
coming up in May as well. So if anyone's listening and would like to learn more, check out the show notes or go to jigsawlearning.ca /events/retreat. And you'll see Bev's session right there, ready to go for May. So it's been an absolute pleasure, not just the conversation today, Bev, but our ongoing relationship, working and friendship as well. It means a lot to us.
It is such a
Same
pleasure
here.
with you.
Same here.
All right. With that, wishing you all the best, Bev. Take care.
Take care, Bev.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, we've reached the point of the episode where we do a little bit of summarizing. And if anyone listens to this podcast over and over and over again, we're probably repeating a lot of the same things. And we always start with, oh, love that conversation and the
Yeah.
insights. And that was the case again with Bev and the work that she's done from the inclusive education side. What stood out for you?
Oh, I've been doing lots of work with Bev, and I just can't begin to describe how that journey has shaped and molded that group of educators. And it's been a really exciting journey alongside of Bev, and Bev leading that way as well. So
Yeah.
just fantastic. She talked a little bit about how when we started, it was messy, and she's absolutely right. It
Yeah.
was incredibly messy to get going because not everyone knew exactly where we were heading or what that vision was that
Yeah.
Bev had for what was coming next. But learning and getting constant feedback from that team along the way has really shaped and molded the work that they've done.
But don't you think messy is
Messy's good.
part of the process
It
if you're
is.
trying to get to clarity and consistency?
Yeah.
Because that's what she's
That's exactly
doing
what
there,
is
is
happening. Yeah.
recognizing every school and community is unique, and it is within Northern Gateway, but we can still have clarity and consistency system wide
Yeah.
in relation to how does this role support students and staff, and how do we maximize how we support everyone through the inclusive supports.
Well, and as she talked about designing that role or clarifying that role,
Yeah.
she had to start at a place where people just named everything that they did,
Yeah.
because in that whole group, they weren't really clear about whether this thing that I do, is that part of my role as an IEF, or my role as an assistant principal, or my role as a teacher,
Yeah.
because of course in many small schools people wear multiple
Yeah,
hats.
of course. Well, and I think too, one of the things that stood out, and you and I have been really excited about this over the last probably 2 to 4 years, is re-envisioning that collaborative team meeting,
Yeah.
which is a critical part. And I loved what she said, is it's a critical part of collaborative response, but it's not collaborative response. But re-envisioning, utilizing the structures and processes that work well to respond to needs of students, to put it into other contexts. So being able to say, in my role, here's a key issue I have. Who else has it? And let's brainstorm. What could we do? And again, we didn't get to go fully in depth, but their principals in Northern Gateway, when they have admin meetings, come in the same way. And their last one was, my key issue is getting into classrooms to be able to supervise and support instruction. Okay. Who else is experiencing trouble with that? And it's no judgment, but what could we do? And someone shares, well, here's the schedule I created, and here's how I developed time. And then they, from their learning services team, do the exact same process around their schools. They're out in schools, they're engaging in conversations, gathering data, and then coming back and saying, hey, in this school, here's a key issue that was surfacing. Okay, what could we do? What other schools are we seeing this? And how could we support some growth and movement in that area? Always around support and response, not venting and judging.
Yeah, and that key issue process that is used in multiple different ways, each time that it's used, it creates another opportunity of collaboration, whether that's principals with principals, or IEFs with IEFs, or teachers collaborating around students. The multiple layers of collaboration that are formed by using that process is just so incredible and impactful, highly
100%.
impactful.
So because Bev really did focus in on that structure, we'll include in the show notes a section of our website that is all about the collaborative team meeting, being able to observe a clip of what it looks like, some supporting resources. We'll put that in. We'll also include information around when she said the latest book really clicked. We'll make sure that you can access the introductory chapter for that as well.
And as we mentioned, Bev will be speaking at retreat as well. So we're super excited to have her share her story at our annual retreat.
Yeah, and we'll include the link for that as well. So to me, this again really reinforces the idea that every child is benefiting from the teams that we're establishing. And Bev's perspective on another role in those teams in schools has been really helpful for us. So as always, reach out if you have questions, if you have guest suggestions, anything that we can do to help support. Well, we would love to be able to do that. Until next time, wishing you all the best.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.